Today we're exploring every major German fighting vehicle of World War II, from tiny armored cars to the legendary Tiger tanks. From lightly armored machines to some of the most powerful fighting vehicles ever built. Starting with number 1, SDKF Z221, Germany, 1935. The SDKF Z221 was Germany's answer to a simple but urgent question. How do you see the enemy before he sees you? Built on a four-wheel chassis with thin 13mm armor, its job was reconnaissance, racing ahead of advancing columns to report enemy positions rather than fight them directly. Its open-top turret carried only a machine gun, a deliberate trade-off that kept the vehicle light and fast on European roads, but left crews dangerously exposed to shellfire, grenades, and even small arms fire from above. In Poland and France it performed its scouting role, well precisely because German commanders used it as intended, as eyes rather than muscle. The real weakness emerged when crews were forced into ad hoc combat, where its thin skin and open top turned minor engagements into fatal ones. It set a pattern that would repeat across the war, machines built for one purpose being pushed into another, and its light chassis quietly proved that speed and visibility, not armor, would define Germany's early reconnaissance doctrine. Number 2, SDKF Z231, 8 Rad, Germany, 1937. Where the 221 was built for speed, the 8-wheeled SDKF Z231 was built for range and durability, a heavy armored car designed to keep pace with mechanized divisions over hundreds of kilometers without breaking down. Its most unusual feature was a drivetrain with steering on all axles, letting it turn sharply despite its size and length, an engineering solution to the problem of maneuvering a long vehicle through tight European terrain. Armed with a 20mm autocannon, it could fight lighter vehicles while still functioning as a reconnaissance platform, giving German divisions a scout that could also punch back. In North Africa, its long range suited the open desert perfectly, but the same desert exposed its weakness. Sand fouled the complex all-wheel steering system, and maintenance crews spent exhausting hours keeping it operational far from proper repair depots. Its complexity meant it was expensive and slow to produce, so it never appeared in the numbers commanders wanted. Still, it proved that a scout vehicle could also be a fighting one, a lesson later designs would build on directly. Number 3, Panzer I, Germany, 1934. The Panzer I was never supposed to be a real tank at all. Restricted by the Treaty of Versailles from openly building armor vehicles, Germany developed it in secrecy as a training platform to teach crews the fundamentals of tank warfare before heavier designs existed. Armed with nothing more than 2 machine guns and protected by armor barely thick enough to stop rifle fire, it was obsolete for real combat almost the moment it appeared. Yet by 1939, it still made up a significant portion of the Panzer divisions, simply because nothing else existed in sufficient numbers. In Poland and France, its weakness became brutally clear. It could not penetrate enemy armor and struggled even against fortified infantry positions, and crews often described feeling naked inside it under artillery fire. Losses were heavy, and by the time of the Soviet invasion in 1941, most surviving units had been withdrawn from frontline combat entirely. Its true legacy was not on the battlefield, but in the training grounds, where it taught an entire generation of Panzer crews the tactics that machines like the Tiger would later execute. Number 4, Panzer II, Germany, 1936. The Panzer II was meant only as a stopgap, a slightly better armed light tank to bridge the gap, until the Panzer III and IV reached full production. Yet circumstances forced it into a starring role it was never designed for. Its 20mm autocannon gave it a real edge over the Panzer I, letting it engage light armor and fortified positions with something more than a machine gun, and its thin armor kept it fast and mechanically reliable across long campaigns. In the invasion of France, it formed the backbone of several Panzer divisions simply because heavier tanks were still scarce, and it performed adequately against equally light Allied vehicles. The problem arrived in 1941, when it met Soviet T-34s and KV-1s on the Eastern Front, and its gun proved almost useless against their sloped, thickened armor, turning many engagements into one-sided slaughter. Crews who once trusted the vehicle now dreaded encounters with Soviet armor, knowing their own shells would often bounce off harmlessly. By 1942, most had been pulled from frontline tank duty, their chassis repurposed for self-propelled guns, a quiet admission that the design's time as a fighting tank had ended. Number 5, Panzer 38T, Germany, 1939. Not originally a German design at all, the Panzer 38T was a Czechoslovak tank absorbed into the Wehrmacht after the occupation of Czechoslovakia, and it turned out to be one of the more capable light tanks available to Germany in the war's opening years. Its riveted and bolted construction was unusual for the era, and while less elegant than welded designs, it proved remarkably easy to manufacture and repair in the field, a quiet advantage during fast-moving campaigns where downtime meant death. In Poland and France, it outperformed Germany's own Panzer I and II in reliability and firepower, giving crews genuine confidence in its 37mm gun against contemporary opposition. That confidence collapsed on the Eastern Front, where, like its German-built counterparts, it simply could not penetrate Soviet armor, forcing crews into desperate flanking maneuvers just to survive an engagement. Rather than retire the design, German engineers stripped its turret entirely and used the chassis as the foundation for tank destroyers, most famously the Hetzer, meaning the 38T. S real war ended not in defeat, but in transformation into something far more dangerous. Number 6. SD KFZ-251, Germany, 1939. The SD KFZ-251 solved a problem that had haunted German tank doctrine since the invasion of Poland. Tanks could break through enemy lines, but the infantry meant to hold that ground on foot could not keep pace or survive artillery fire while doing it. Its half-track design, wheels at the front for steering and tracks at the rear for traction, gave it enough off-road mobility to follow tanks across broken terrain while carrying a full infantry squad in armored comfort compared to open trucks. This vehicle effectively created the doctrine of Panzer Grenadiers, mechanized infantry that moved and fought alongside armor rather than behind it, and its open top let soldiers dismount quickly under fire, a genuine tactical advantage in fast assaults. That same open top became a liability against artillery airbursts and Soviet aircraft strafing runs, exposing troops at the worst possible moments. Despite the risk, over 15,000 were built across dozens of variants, some carrying mortars, others anti-tank guns, making it one of the most structurally important vehicles of the war, even though it rarely appears in the same conversations as the tanks it supported. Number 7. Panzer III, Germany, 1939. Designed from the outset as the main battle tank of the German army, the Panzer III was built around a philosophy of balance, adequate armor, adequate speed, and a gun sized to fight other tanks rather than merely support infantry. Its 5-man crew, unusually large for the period, divided tasks so the commander could focus purely on observation and tactics instead of also loading the gun, a structural decision that gave German crews a genuine edge in battlefield awareness during the invasions of Poland, France, and the early war in North Africa. Its 37 and later 50mm guns were competitive against most opposition it met in 1939 and 1940, but by the time Germany invaded the Soviet Union, that same gun could barely dent a T-34's sloped armor, even at close range. Engineers upgraded the gun repeatedly, but the chassis had reached its limit, unable to accept anything powerful enough to restore parity. Production quietly shifted toward the Panzer IV and the Panzer III's chassis, like the 38T. Found new purpose beneath the Stu G3, proof that even an obsolete tank could still shape the war from underneath a different vehicle. Number 8. Panzer IV, Germany, 1939. Where nearly every other German tank became obsolete or was pulled from frontline service, the Panzer IV remained in continuous production and combat use from the invasion of Poland to the final surrender in 1945, making it the true backbone of the German Panzer Force. Its original short-barreled 75mm gun was designed for infantry support rather than tank fighting, but the chassis had enough internal volume and structural reserve to accept a longer, far more powerful gun once Soviet armor exposed the weakness of Germany's early tank guns, a flexibility few contemporary designs shared. That upgrade transformed almost overnight from an outdated support vehicle into a genuine threat to T-34s and even early Shermans, buying it years of continued relevance. Crews valued its mechanical reliability and relative simplicity compared to newer designs like the Panther, which suffered persistent transmission problems, and its familiarity meant fewer training accidents and breakdowns in the field. More Panzer IVs were built than any other German tank of the war, over 8,000 units, and its steady, adaptable design proved that evolution, not radical redesign, was what actually kept a tank fighting for 6 straight years. Number 9. Stu G3, Germany, 1940. Built on the Panzer III chassis, but stripped of its rotating turret, the Stu G3 was originally conceived purely as a mobile assault gun, escorting infantry and blasting fortified positions with a low-velocity gun at close range. Removing the turret dramatically lowered the vehicle's profile, making it harder to spot and hit on a battlefield, and cheaper and faster to manufacture than a turreted tank, a critical advantage as Germany's industrial capacity strained under wartime demand. When Soviet armor began overwhelming German tank guns in 1941, engineers refitted the Stu-G3 with a longer, high-velocity 75mm gun, and it unexpectedly became one of the most effective tank killers of the entire war, credited with more kills than any other German armored vehicle by 1944. Its fixed gun meant crews had to maneuver the entire vehicle to aim, a serious tactical limitation in fast-moving or ambush situations, but disciplined crews using it defensively from prepared positions turned that weakness into a strength. Cheaper than a Panzer IV yet devastatingly effective in the right hands, it became proof that in a war of shrinking resources, simplicity and volume could matter more than sophistication. Number 10. Marder III, Germany, 1942. The Marder III emerged from pure desperation. Germany urgently needed a mobile platform that could carry the powerful captured Soviet 76mm gun, and its own newer anti-tank weapons after 1941 revealed just how outmatched existing German tank guns were, and engineers achieved it by mounting an open-top gun shield directly onto the reliable Panzer 38T chassis. The result looked improvised because it was tall, thinly protected, and offering crews no overhead cover, but its firepower let it destroy Soviet tanks from ranges German tanks simply could not match at the time. In practice, the Marder III worked best as an ambush weapon, dug in and camouflaged, striking enemy armor before being repositioned rather than engaging in open, mobile combat where its thin armor and high profile made it an easy target for return fire or artillery airbursts. Crew losses from shell fragments and grenades thrown into the open fighting compartment were a persistent danger that better protected tank destroyers later avoided entirely. It was never meant to be elegant, only urgently effective, and thousands were built precisely because Germany needed firepower on the battlefield faster than proper engineering could deliver it. Number 11. Wesp, Germany, 1942. The Wesp answered a different kind of problem entirely, not how to kill enemy tanks, but how to bring artillery support close enough to fast-moving panzer divisions without leaving it exposed on open roads. Built on a shortened Panzer II chassis with its own 105mm howitzer mounted in an open-topped superstructure, it gave mobile divisions their own integrated artillery that could keep pace across terrain towed guns could never cross quickly enough. Its light armor was a deliberate trade-off, since its role was to fire from behind friendly lines rather than face direct combat, but that same light protection made it vulnerable whenever fighting shifted unexpectedly close, a real risk during the fluid battles of the Eastern Front. Crews appreciated its mobility and the tactical flexibility of instant, mobile fire support, a genuine advantage over the slower process of repositioning towed artillery under fire. Roughly 700 were built, a modest number that reflected Germany's limited industrial bandwidth rather than any lack of usefulness, and it quietly proved that self-propelled artillery, not just self-propelled tank killers, was becoming essential to how modern mechanized warfare actually functioned. Number 12. Panther, Germany, 1943. The Panther was Germany's direct engineering answer to the T-34, borrowing its sloped armor philosophy to deflect shells rather than simply absorb them, a lesson learned the hard way on the Eastern Front. Its long-barreled 75mm gun had exceptional penetration and accuracy at long range, arguably making it a more balanced tank overall than the heavier Tiger, combining strong firepower with better mobility and a lower silhouette. Rushed into production ahead of schedule to meet the demands of the Battle of Kursk in 1943, early Panthers suffered from serious, sometimes catastrophic transmission and final drive failures, with some units losing more tanks to mechanical breakdown than to enemy fire during their combat debut. Crews grew to both respect and fear the vehicle, trusting its gun and armor in a fight, but dreading the constant risk of mechanical failure on long marches. Later production runs resolved many of these issues, and the Panther eventually became widely regarded as one of the best all-around tanks of the war, but its disastrous introduction remains a lasting lesson in what happens when battlefield pressure forces a design into service before it is truly ready. Number 13. Nashorn, Germany, 1943. The Nashorn carried one of the most powerful anti-tank guns Germany fielded, an 88mm weapon capable of destroying nearly any Allied or Soviet tank at ranges its opponents could not effectively return fire, mounted on a lightly armored, open-top chassis built for speed and concealment rather than direct confrontation. Its entire tactical purpose depended on striking first from ambush and then relocating immediately, since its thin armor offered almost no protection if an enemy closed to short range or if artillery found its position. Crews operating it lived with constant tension, aware that a single well-placed enemy shell or even shell fragments from a near miss could be catastrophic given the open fighting compartment above them. Despite this vulnerability, its long-range firepower made it a genuinely effective tank killer throughout the Eastern Front and later in Normandy, where German commanders used its range advantage to punish Allied armor advancing across open ground. It represented a recurring theme in German tank destroyer design during this period: extraordinary offensive power paired with almost no protection for the men operating it, a trade Germany's shrinking resources increasingly forced it to make. Number 14. Hummel, Germany, 1943. Built to give Panzer divisions heavier artillery support than the West could provide, the Hummel mounted a large 150mm howitzer on a chassis combining Panzer III and Panzer IV components, an engineering compromise that let Germany reuse existing production lines rather than design an entirely new hull during a period of mounting industrial strain. Its open-top fighting compartment left the crew exposed to shrapnel and small arms fire, the same recurring weakness seen across Germany's self-propelled gun designs, but its role as an indirect fire support vehicle, striking from well behind the front line, meant it rarely faced direct enemy contact in a way tank destroyers like the Nashorn did. Its heavy shell could devastate fortified positions, troop concentrations, and even damage enemy armor when used in a direct fire role during defensive emergencies. Roughly 700 were built, and crews valued its mobility compared to towed heavy artillery, since it could displace quickly after firing to avoid counter-battery fire, a survival tactic that became increasingly important as Allied air power made stationary artillery positions deadly to occupy for long. Number 15. Ferdinand, Elephant, Germany, 1943. Born from a rejected Tiger tank design by engineer Ferdinand Porsche, the Ferdinand repurposed nearly 90 unused hulls into a massive tank destroyer armed with an extraordinarily powerful 88mm gun capable of destroying enemy tanks at ranges far beyond their ability to respond. Its front armor was exceptionally thick, making frontal engagements nearly impossible for Soviet tanks to win, and at the Battle of Kursk it inflicted heavy losses on advancing Soviet armor precisely because of that near invulnerability from the front. That same design contained a critical flaw. Early production vehicles were built without a single machine gun, leaving them completely unable to defend against enemy infantry who could approach the vehicle's blind spots and destroy it with satchel charges or grenades, a vulnerability Soviet troops learned to exploit deliberately. Combined with mechanical unreliability and difficult recovery when it broke down, losses mounted quickly despite its near immunity to tank fire. Later rebuilt and renamed Elephant with an added machine gun, the vehicle's brief combat history stands as a stark lesson that overwhelming firepower and armor mean little if a design ignores the basic threat of infantry at close range. Number 16. SD-KFZ-234 Puma, Germany, 1943. The SD-KFZ-234 Puma represented the final, most refined evolution of Germany's wheeled reconnaissance vehicles, combining a diesel engine for extended range with a fully enclosed turret mounting a genuinely effective 50mm gun, giving it real fighting capability rather than relying purely on speed and stealth like earlier scout cars. Its 8-wheel drive gave it excellent off-road mobility for a wheeled vehicle, and its sloped armor, though still relatively thin, offered meaningfully better protection than the open-top cars that came before it. In the deserts of North Africa and later on the plains of Eastern Europe, its long operational range let it conduct extended reconnaissance missions without frequent refueling, a real tactical advantage for commanders needing continuous intelligence on enemy movements. Its gun, while effective against light vehicles and infantry, still could not compete with dedicated tank destroyers against heavy armor, meaning crews had to rely on speed and terrain to avoid direct confrontation with serious opposition. Arriving late in the war and in limited numbers, the Puma showed what Germany's armored car doctrine had learned across 6 years of combat, arriving just as the war's momentum had already turned decisively against it. Number 17. Hetzer, Germany, 1944. Built on the reliable Panzer 38T chassis, the Hetzer was designed to solve a problem plaguing nearly every German tank destroyer before it, providing serious anti-tank firepower without the enormous cost, weight, and exposed crew compartments of vehicles like the Nashorn. Its low, heavily sloped profile made it exceptionally difficult to spot and hit, while its 75mm gun could still penetrate most Allied and Soviet tanks at typical combat ranges, giving small, cheap, and easily hidden vehicles' genuine lethality against far larger opponents. Crews valued its compact size for ambush tactics in forests, villages, and hedgerows, where it could strike and disengage before enemy armor could effectively respond, though its cramped interior made crew comfort and ammunition handling genuinely difficult during sustained combat. Its narrow tracks, sized for the lighter 38T chassis, occasionally struggled under muddy conditions when overloaded with added armor plating in later production runs. Over 2,000 were built in the war's final 2 years, making it one of the most numerically significant tank destroyers fielded, and it proved that in a war of dwindling resources, a small, cheap, well-hidden gun could still shape a battlefield dominated by far larger machines. Number 18. Panzer IV, Germany, 1944. The Panzer IV took the lessons of the WWII's success and applied them to the Panzer IV chassis, creating a low, well-armored tank destroyer with strong frontal protection and a powerful long-barreled 75mm gun capable of defeating most Allied armor, encountered on the western and eastern fronts alike. Its sloped front armor, inspired directly by the effectiveness of Soviet and German slope designs elsewhere in the war, deflected many rounds that would have penetrated a flat-faced vehicle of similar thickness, giving crews genuine confidence in head-on engagements. Like the WWII before it, its fixed gun meant the entire vehicle had to be aimed using its tracks, a persistent tactical limitation that left it vulnerable to flanking attacks it could not quickly counter. Material shortages later in the war led some production runs to use a shorter, less powerful gun variant, a compromise that noticeably reduced its effectiveness against the newest Allied tanks arriving in 1944 and 1945. Despite these constraints, it remained one of the more balanced and cost-effective tank destroyers Germany fielded, proof that refining an existing successful concept could matter more than chasing entirely new designs. Number 19. Panther, Germany, 1944. Combining the excellent Panther chassis with the devastating 88mm gun used on the Tiger II, the Panther is widely regarded by historians as one of the most effective tank destroyers of the entire war, capable of defeating virtually any Allied or Soviet tank at ranges those tanks could not effectively return fire. Its heavily sloped front armor, inherited from the Panther, combined firepower, protection, and mobility in a way few other German vehicles managed to balance simultaneously, avoiding the extreme trade-off seen in earlier tank destroyers like the Nashorn or Ferdinand. Crews who operated it consistently reported strong confidence in its capabilities, a rare sentiment among German tank crews by 1944, when most vehicles carried serious compromises somewhere in their design. Its major limitation was never the vehicle itself, but Germany's collapsing industrial capacity, since fewer than 400 were ever built despite its clear battlefield effectiveness, meaning its impact, while significant in individual engagements, could never be decisive at an army-wide scale. The Panther stands as a case study in what German engineering could achieve when a design matured properly rather than being rushed into desperate service. Number 20. Tiger, Germany, 1944. Built to demolish fortified urban positions rather than fight enemy tanks, the Tiger mounted a massive 380mm rocket launcher on a Tiger I chassis, a weapon originally designed for naval use against submarines, repurposed to level entire buildings with a single devastating strike during the brutal close quarters fighting Germany increasingly faced as the war moved on to its own territory. Its enormous rocket-propelled shell carried far more explosive force than any conventional tank gun, capable of destroying reinforced structures and clearing city blocks that smaller weapons could barely dent, making it uniquely suited to the desperate urban battles of the war's final year. Its limitations were severe. An extremely slow reload process, only a handful of spare rounds carried at any time, and a heavy, cumbersome chassis poorly suited to the rubble-strewn streets it was meant to fight in. Fewer than 20 were ever built, and most saw only brief, isolated action before Germany's collapse made further deployment impossible. The Tiger remains one of the war's strangest vehicles, an answer to a very specific late-war problem that arrived just as Germany's capacity to use any weapon effectively was disappearing entirely. Number 21. WWII, Germany, 1944. By 1944, Allied air superiority had become one of the single greatest threats facing German armored columns, and the WWII was built specifically to answer it, mounting 4 rapid-firing 20mm cannons in a rotating turret on a Panzer IV chassis to create a genuinely effective mobile anti-aircraft platform. Its open-top turret allowed excellent visibility and a wide field of fire against low-flying fighter bombers, the aircraft doing the most damage to German supply columns and tank formations by 1944, and its high rate of fire could shred lightly armored ground attack aircraft attempting strafing runs. That same open top left its crew exposed to strafing fire and shell fragments during exactly the kind of attacks it was designed to prevent, a grim irony not lost on the men who operated it. Built on a readily available and mechanically proven chassis, it could be produced relatively quickly compared to entirely new designs, an important consideration as German industry buckled under constant Allied bombing. Though never available in numbers sufficient to blunt Allied air dominance meaningfully, it represented a genuine and necessary adaptation to a battlefield increasingly controlled from the sky rather than the ground. Number 22. Maus, Germany, 1944. The Maus was the physical endpoint of an idea taken to its absolute extreme, a super heavy tank weighing an almost unbelievable 188 tons, armed with a 128mm gun powerful enough to destroy any Allied or Soviet tank in existence, while carrying armor thick enough to be virtually immune to return fire from any weapon fielded during the war. Its sheer size created problems no amount of engineering skill could fully solve. Most bridges in Europe could not support its weight. Its engine strained constantly to move it, and its enormous fuel consumption made sustained operations nearly impossible given Germany's collapsing fuel supplies by 1944. Only 2 prototypes were ever completed, and neither saw meaningful combat before Soviet forces captured the testing grounds where they sat, one destroyed by its own crew to prevent capture. The Maus never fought a single real battle, and its story ultimately illustrates the same lesson found across Germany's late-war vehicle programs, that raw firepower and armor meant nothing without the logistics, fuel, and industrial capacity to actually field a weapon at scale, a lesson Germany learned too late to change the outcome of the war it had already lost. If you enjoy exploring the machines that shape the battlefield, make sure to subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.